Primary elections dominate discussions as APC stakeholders hold caucus meeting in Abuja.
I think everybody has confidence that we will do a very credible primaries to ensure that those who fly the flag of the party has the mandate.
Presidential Advisory Committee on Prerogative of Mercy inaugurated.
Will go a long way in bringing about a drastic reduction in the population of prisoners in the nation's prison system.
Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation to establish 2 condensate refineries.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall look at the second part of reviving the eastern seaports, plus the UK Prime Minister's visit to Nigeria.
About 2 weeks ago, Good Morning Nigeria turned its searchlight on the abandoned eastern seaports, which to a large extent contributed to the gridlock being experienced in the Lagos ports.
Yes, Kirian, and in that edition of the program, we assembled some of the key players in the industry who analyzed the major factors responsible for the underutilization of the eastern seaports.
And of course, the guests identified exorbitant fees being charged to importers, inadequate facilities in the affected seaports, and insecurity, as well as technical competitiveness of ports, among others.
Yes, so many issues were thrown up, Kirian, and they advocated for the review of the concessioning arrangement of the ports and the need for the states and people in the affected seaports to own the facilities.
And what should be done to encourage trade facilitation in these seaports? How do we make the seaports technically competitive and efficient? What kind of collaboration is needed between the state and federal governments to make them viable? These are some of the questions we intend to put to our guests as we continue with our discussion on reviving the eastern seaports. This is Good Morning Nigeria, the midweek edition of the program. I am Kirian Umayo. You're welcome.
And I am Sheung Olagunju. Good to have you join us again on Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, in Abuja, Nigeria's capital. And aside from the seaports, we shall also discuss the visit of the United Kingdom's Prime Minister, Theresa May, to Nigeria. And
as usual, our traditional complementary parts of the program shall be brought to you, including newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and entertainment news. The morning news is right now with Comfort Amodu. Hello, Comfort.
Hello, Kirian and Show. Good morning. Now, issues relating to the forthcoming primary elections for the 2019 polls dominated discussions as stakeholders of the governing All Progressives Congress held a crucial meeting Tuesday evening.
We basically discussed how to ensure full compliance with the INEC guideline, and also ensure that we observe all the principles of internal democracy, participation, inclusion, fairness, and justice. I think everybody has confidence that we will do a very credible primary.
The federal government is to develop national strategy to address the increasing rates of malnutrition in children in Nigeria. This was made known at the meeting of the National Council on Nutrition held in Presidential Villa.
We hope also to be able to convince the states that also the states need to have a state-level council for nutrition, local government council level for nutrition, as well as community or ward level council.
Children die and we think it's a medical problem, but they die because they are malnourished. And some of these are simple things like exclusive breastfeeding for 2 years, which are even prescribed by Islam. So it's about communication. It's about knowing the right diet.
The National Assembly Joint Committee on INEC has set up subcommittee to analyze the 2019 election budget breakdown submitted by the Independent National Electoral Commission. The Presidential Advisory Committee on Prerogative of Mercy has been inaugurated with a mandate to work tirelessly to ensure the decongestion of the nation's prisons by advising the President on ex-convicts to be pardoned. Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, senior advocate of Nigeria who represented the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, while inaugurating the 12-member committee, challenged them to embark on prison nationwide visit to ascertain the inmates who deserve presidential pardon and reintegration into the society. Abubakar Malami, who is also the chairman of the committee, promised to work diligently within the 4-term frame of decongesting the prisons.
By Mr. President and Commander-in-Chief will go a long way in bringing about a drastic reduction in the population of prisoners in the nation's prison system that has become a block of the nation's criminal justice system.
Now, securing the nation's coastal waters is one of the several ongoing interventions by the federal government to reposition the maritime sector to play a leading role in economic diversification. President Muhammadu Buhari stated this in a message to the public presentation of the book Harnessing Nigerian's Maritime Assets, Past, Present and Future in Abuja.
A total of $195 million for the establishment of maritime security. Once that is done, we will have activities in the maritime sector.
We're making progress in the area of capacity building. We are making progress in navigational safety. We need to invest in infrastructure.
And away from that, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation is set to establish 2 condensate refineries with a refining capacity of 200,000 barrels per day. The refineries are to be located at Western Forcados area and Asan North or Haji area of Delta and Imo states. NMPC Group Managing Director Dr. Mekanti Baru made this known in Abuja at the bid opening for the provision of consultancy services for a feasibility study for the refineries.
You might ask me, the PIGB, we're going to be commercial, yes. The condensate refineries are going to be fully on a commercial basis. We are going to get partners that will invest.
And that report does it on the news. Good Morning Nigeria will continue shortly with Shehu and Carrion after this time out.
Unemployment, notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem frontally through revival of agriculture.
The 30K is going a long way. Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and presently I have a cassava farm and a yam farm.
Dettol team is visiting schools to teach children how to protect themselves from diseases. Do you know how we get illnesses like diarrhea, cough, and cold? No! They are spread through germs, which are everywhere. You collect germs that cause diseases. You pick up germs from any surface, like when you don't wash your hands after going to the toilet, while playing. And then you can get sick because of germs. That's why you need to fight germs to stay healthy by washing your hands and taking your bath with Dettol soap to protect from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Wash, wash, wash your hands. What you have to do is bath yourself. Dettol soap every day. Wash, wash, wash your hands.
reorganized, trained, and fully equipped. We are the new improved Nigeria Police Force. We fight crime. We bust syndicates. Whatever the crime, wherever the hideout, the Nigeria Police Force will get you busted. Stop kidnapping, armed robbery, murder, pipeline vandalism, and other criminal activities. Be productive. Be security conscious. Join the police force to secure your life and property. This message is from the Nigeria Police Force Public Relations Department.
Fake news which is shared for malicious purposes is a danger to our peace and security in Nigeria. Misinformation as fake news is a serious threat to our hard-earned democracy and promotes hatred and misunderstanding between our communities. We are all responsible for stopping the spread of fake news in its tracks. So, always check the source and credibility of any news item. Say no to fake news. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information.
Brought us as usual.
As usual. You have no problem.
For the three people.
You are welcome, sir.
As usual, yeah?
Welcome. You take that one. You take that one. You don't understand? We want Nigerian homegrown rice. Finish. You don't have? You don't have?
Join the rice revolution today.
No other rice that tastes like Nigerian rice. Are you sorry? That's the Nigerian rice we are talking about. Chocolate made in Nigerian rice. Healthy food. I'm going to bring Mrs. Mobu to come to chocolate rice made in Nigeria here. And see how it is made.
Correct.
And how they cook it.
Correct.
Homegrown rice are good for your health. It boosts our economy and give employment to our people.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Give me the value pack. Helen!
You do great value shopping.
Absolutely. I'm a champion at getting value.
Then you must have bought the Harpic 200 ml.
Why Harpic when I have this?
Even after applying them 10 times, they won't give a sparkling clean toilet.
Impossible.
Challenge. Detergent and bleach can't give a sparkling clean toilet even after 10 times. But Harpic 200 ml gives a sparkling clean toilet at one go.
Wow.
Harpic 200 ml. Real deal. Now only 200 naira.
Time to talk business on Good Morning Nigeria, as experts in the mining sector are calling on the federal government to develop a fiscal regime for the artisanal and small-scale miners to curtail revenue loss to the nation and enhance environmental safety. For this and more, let's join Chimobi Walter-Nachi.
Hello and welcome to the segment. And with the news making the rounds on the business world, we start with the solid mineral sector, where experts in the mining sector are calling on the federal government to develop a fiscal regime for the artisanal and small-scale miners to curtail revenue loss to the nation and enhance environmental safety. Liakatung Babatunde reports that they are also requesting the host communities be carried along to reduce the health incidences occasioned by unregulated mining.
Our government is not deriving any revenue from this form of mining, and at the same time the mining host communities are bearing the burden of the environmental devastation and the infrastructural strain.
We need to organize the fiscal miners, and we need to cover them with proactive legislation. That legislation will define who is doing what and how.
Global Rights, a non-profit organization, is leading this conversation, which aims to see authorities not only develop a realistic fiscal regime for the mining sector, but also implement it.
After being organized, they need to be supported. We all agree that these are people that mine to survive. They are not career miners. And so the methods of mining is largely detrimental to environment.
There are cases filed and recorded, and there are environmental issues, health issues associated with mining. So what government is doing right now is to make sure that all this doesn't happen again.
Building the capacity of these miners, they say, is imperative. The artisanal and small-scale mining sector in Nigeria is one shrouded in uncertainty as no accurate data or information exists about it. It is estimated that 80% of the mining sector is in the hands of these artisanal miners, whom are often regarded as illegal due to the fact that no formal recognition has been given to them. Now, moving on, Nigeria's excess oil revenue has increased from $48.3 million to $58 million per day as international oil prices rises to $76 per barrel from $72. Recall that the federal government had benchmarked its 2018 budget earnings at $51 and 2.3 million barrels oil output. However, the oil price, which had hovered between $70 and $74 in the past few weeks, rose to $76 per barrel, thus causing the nation's excess oil revenue to swell. Specifically, the price of Brent stood at $76 per barrel, while that of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, basket stood at $71.75. Market watchers expect prices to rise further as OPEC has predicted possible rise in global oil demand, expected to drive developments in the market. Let's now take a look at the trading figures on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. And that's the stories making rounds now. Thanks for your time. I'm Chimobi Walter Naji.
Thank you indeed, Chimobi, for that business report. Newspaper review is next on Good Morning Nigeria.
You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria Newspaper Review, and we kick off with the authority. And above the nameplate of the authority, there are a bunch of headlines. 2019, traders shut down Ladipo market to collect PVCs. UK returns 27.5 billion naira seized from Nigerian. Federal government, states, local governments guilty of abandoned projects. That's according to the EFCC. And detail on page 6. Court insists on order stopping DSCV from hiking tariffs. That's on page 3 of the authority. And below the nameplate of the authority, Kwankwaso's declaration, federal government seals Eagle Square, ICC. With riders, CUPP condemns action, accuses Buhari of intimidation. We're on routine security surveillance. Police replies that accusation. And then the picture story on the front page of the authority is that of the Ooni of Ife, Oba Adeyeye Ogunwusi Ojaja II, President Muhammadu Buhari, and an investor in green projects, chairman of GDT Investment, Sheriff Ahmad bin Zohir Al Natur, during the visit of the Ooni and Sheriff Ahmad to the presidential villa in Abuja yesterday. Beside that, 2 APC ministers set to quit Buhari's cabinet, and alleged money laundering, clamor mounts for trial of Kachiko, others. Operation Python dance, IPOB orders another seat at home. Those are the headlines on the front page of the quite busy authority. Carry on.
Yes, I have the Daily Independent here, and above the nameplate of Daily Independent, we have a striking story here. NNPC plans 200,000 BPD, that's barrels per day condensate refineries in Delta and Imo State. And Nigerians, have been waiting for this to happen, for us to have more, refineries added to the old ones that we have. At least have a more modern refineries. All right. And below that, we have Afenifere Capers of Shebaju over comments on restructuring. That's on page 38 of Daily Independent. And now below the nameplate is all about 2019 election. Lamido, Tambua, Makrafi, Atiku, others no fate October 6. With 2 riders, federal government bars Kwankwaso from using Eagle Square for presidential declaration. CUPP kicks over action. CUPP is actually the coalition of the union of political parties. Now, below the, or rather, beside the photograph on Daily Independent, to have court warns against illegal removal of Saraki. It's on page 5. Then PDP asks Buhari to explain 4 trillion unlimited oil revenue on page 38. And just below the photograph, we have Oshomole forecloses automatic tickets for Kogi, Bauchi, and Kaduna State governors, with 2 riders to that story. APC holds NEC meeting. Oshu polls presidential primaries on the cards. Unveils former Delta Governor Doyam at caucus meeting. All right, and should we still have another
Yeah, please go to the editorial.
Yeah.
I think we'll just go to the editorial straight, which you have with you, Kirian.
Okay. All right, now to the editorials. Decentralization of police operations. That's another important issue being raised by the Daily Sun on its editorial column. It says, buoyed by the need to tackle rising security challenges in the land, the National Economic Council, NEC, recently resolved to map out plans to decentralize police operations across the country. Disclosing this to newsmen in Abuja after the council meeting, the National Security Advisor, Babagana Monguno, said the decentralization of the police would aid greater access to information, unlike the present centralized approach. Well, what this means is that police operation can now be decentralized, perhaps zonalized, to ensure that more information circulate within the police system. But let me just read down a little bit so you understand what this means. A committee to be headed by the Inspector General of Police, Ibrahim Idris, with representation each from the 6 geopolitical zones, would soon be set up to come up with plans to carry out the exercise. Shehu, what do you make of this exercise?
Yes, there have been calls lately from so many diverse areas of the country for state police, let's just putting it succinctly, state police, so that there will be more coverage of the hinterland, so that crimes will be nipped in the bud. I think that's just what this is all about, decentralizing police operations, taking it away from the federal level to get to the states and probably trickle down to other parts of the country.
Because majority of the crimes in the country are hatched in the rural communities and they're executed at the city centers. And it is very important that this is done because Nigerians will be the better for it. That's the editorials. That's the editorials for this morning, and that perhaps will conclude a newspaper review for this edition of Good Morning Nigeria.
Is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
Under no conditions whatsoever should we tolerate or excuse or justify hate speech or hateful conduct of any kind, especially where such is illegal.
There's no doubt that the resurgent push for separatism, as well as the rising cases of ethnic and religious disharmony, are all traceable to the growing phenomenon of hate speech.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Winning in hot and dry conditions is hard. Causes the body to sweat, which attracts germs that are easily passed from one person to another.
What keeps you so cool, man?
Dettol Cool combines Dettol's protection and an invincible icy feel. For super cool confidence, use Dettol Cool.
Dettol soap is now also available for 100 naira only.
Cadbury Hot Chocolate 3-in-1, a delicious combination of rich cocoa and wholesome goodness of milk. Just add hot water to get an instant chocolatey treat. Cadbury Hot Chocolate 3-in-1. Just add hot water.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous. Whether you do it for fun or for political gains, real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
For years, the NTA has been promoting science, technology, arts and crafts under the tagged name National Children's Expo. We are set with another edition as we gather children around Nigeria, junior category ages 6 to 12 and senior category ages 13 to 18. The theme for Expo 2018, achieving self-sufficiency in agriculture, meeting the challenges of security and exposition of alternative energy as pathways to national development. Date, October 21st to 25th, 2018. Venue, NTA Headquarters Arena, Area 11, Garki, Abuja. We are set to celebrate the best of innovation across the country. For more information, please call the following numbers. NTA ETV, promoting learning.
What makes a Niger mom powerful?
I trust the power of Dettol's One Capful for bathing. The power of Dettol's One Capful protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Be 100% sure.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA, and we move right now to our discussion segments, and we'll bring you now an update as an introduction to our discussions. As Nigeria awaits the visit of the British Prime Minister Theresa May, the British High Commissioner to Nigeria, Paul Arkwright, has addressed the newsmen on the itinerary of the Prime Minister. Oyeyemi Ajayi reports.
This is the first time Prime Minister Theresa May will be visiting Africa, as well as the first time a British Prime Minister will be stepping on the soil of the sub-Saharan Africa since 2013. The Prime Minister will meet with President Muhammadu Buhari on Wednesday after visiting South Africa and end an African tour in Kenya. The British High Commissioner said the tour is to enable Britain continue to relate with the world and strengthen her relations with the world, especially in terms of trade after Brexit.
The UK is the second largest investor in Africa behind the US. We want to become the first investor in Africa.
Other issues expected to be discussed include security, trade, human trafficking and illegal migration, as well as Nigeria's 2019 general election, which the High Commissioner says is supposed to be free, fair and credible, adding that Britain is not supporting any candidate, but only supports a united Nigeria.
And she will be talking to victims of human trafficking herself to hear at first hand their experiences and to see how the United Kingdom continue the help that we've been giving, increase the help that we've been giving, not just to protect those people who are returning, but to look at ways in which we can encourage people to stay in Nigeria, discourage people from migrating illegally to Europe.
The Prime Minister is expected to be in Lagos alongside a high-powered trade delegation, where she will also be meeting with Nigerian business community to discuss on ways to strengthen bilateral ties between the two countries and most especially look at job creation. Partnership, defense cooperation agreements and investment commitments are expected to be made by the Prime Minister.
And to discuss the visit of the Prime Minister is the Honorable, or rather Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Malam Garba Shehu. So you're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
We also have Dr. Mukhtar Imam of the Department of International Relations and Diplomacy. You're also welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
Shehu.
Madam Shehu, thank you very much once again for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria. Like we just said, the UK Prime Minister is expected in Nigeria today. What's your impression of this visit?
Well, knowing that the United Kingdom is perhaps Nigeria's perhaps most important international partner, you know, with the very long years of relationship coming from colonialism up to now, there is a justification in the UK having, you know, an extraordinary kind of interest in about everything that we're doing. So it's an important visit for us and for them, especially at a time when the UK, you know, themselves, they're in a transition, trying to get out of Europe. So therefore, they're looking at the entire, you know, international relations that they're engaged in, and reassessing all of the opportunities that they have, and they're looking at this continent as an important partner.
Staying with you, what are the likely areas of discourse between Prime Minister May and President Buhari?
Well, let me say that, first of all, there are two important agreements that will be signed. One, there is the security and defense, you know, partnership that the two leaders will sign. And their ministers in trade and investment will be signing, you know, an economic development, you know, plan, agreement that will bind the two nations. But beyond this, as the minister just said in the introductory report, there's a long list of issues, including our elections that are coming, matters of human rights, security in the northeast, the things about farmers and the herdsmen, you know, killings and all of that. There are matters that both countries coming together around the table, matters of migration, ease of doing business, and how trade, you know, can be, you know, expanded between our two countries. So the thing then is to virtually all of the issues you can imagine under the sun, you know, legitimately, we will be discussed between the two delegations, given time, you know, and willingness to do so.
All right, all right. Let's also look at this issue from the backgrounding of what really led to these visits. Theresa May actually has been riding on a rough road in the process of implementing Brexit. She has also lost cabinet members in the process. And this visit to sub-Saharan Africa has been viewed or perceived in some quarters as a way of strengthening relationship with some African nations that are very vital. And Dr. Imam, given this background, what is your impression about the visit?
Well, thank you very much. That's a very good question, actually, as it pertains to international relations. First and foremost, you see, after the three basic factors that have helped to avert an impending Third World War. And the most essential, the most important of the three is the growing interdependence among nation states. Today, we find that no nation, from time immemorial, this is what it has always been. But then in recent times, it has become even more imperative to note that the growing interdependence among nation states is very vital to our continued existence and all. Coming to the issue you raised, of course, perception is very important in politics, domestic and international. Theresa May is faced with a lot of domestic crises, just as every other leader around the world is facing its own internal crisis and trying to develop mechanisms to try to address some of these challenges. But having said that, again, it takes me back to the previous issue. The growing interdependence cannot be detached. Whether it is international economic relations or international political relations, however you look at it, there is the need to strengthen relations amongst countries. The United Kingdom, just as the Honorable Special Advisor has just mentioned, Senior Special Advisor, Britain has always been, or the United Kingdom has always been an ally of Nigeria. Not necessarily the relations as colonial, erstwhile colonizers and all, but then again, you look at the position of Britain or the United Kingdom within the international arena. It's a country that has made a mark for itself from the days of Pax Britannica till present day. So therefore, having an ally of sort within the international system is very good for our image within the international polity. So therefore, it's not just about perception of the crisis she's faced with within the domestic arena and how she's trying to play that out within the international system. This goes beyond Theresa May as an individual and President Muhammadu Buhari as an individual. It's about two countries trying to strengthen bilateral relations amongst themselves, which is going to trigger down to the ordinary people. And of course, as we saw from the itinerary, we're expected to hear issues concerning migration, issues about economy, issues about politics and all of that. These are very essential arenas that require attention, considering our present circumstances and all of that. Issues, deficits in areas of development, for example, can be addressed given this sort of platform or relation. Both delegations can sit and address some of these things, because these are what Nigerians hope to see at the end of this conversation. It's not just the Tea Party. Nigerians hope to see results, to see how this relation can transform into something meaningful that will impact the life of average Nigerians. These are the areas that average Nigerians, ordinary Nigerians on the streets have their hopes high on. And of course, and as you may know, in diplomacy, you negotiate from one of three positions. You're either negotiating from a position of weakness, a position of strength, or in no position at all. The big question mark here would be, from what position will we be negotiating?
Are we negotiating from what position?
Well, again, the Honorable Senior Special Advisor is there. I think...
you see, you have international relations background.
Yes.
Right. And you will have better understanding of this.
The truth is this. Theoretically speaking, there are basically material and non-material variables that governments bring to the table to have a conversation. Part of what is material is mineral resources and all of that. And then the non-material is ideology. The selling point of the president has always been his integrity, still is his integrity. And then, again, of course, the ideology and all of that. These are all areas that are summed together to come to the negotiating table and have a conversation. See, I just got back from China a couple of weeks ago, and my conversation with the Ministry of Culture and Tourism was this, that the Chinese do not have half the resources we have in this country in minerals. No, they don't. But the one thing that is essential that the Chinese have been able to put in place to transform their situation is human resource. We need to also look at that aspect as well, to be able to say, how do we harness these very essential resources so that when we come to have a conversation within the international system, we can have a discussion that gives us a purchasing power, or rather that gives us a bargaining power. So these are very essential aspects that we all must try to look at.
Thank you, Dr. Imam.
Yes,
let me come back to Malam Garba Shehu. Yes, no doubt this is a very important visit. It is very good for the image of Nigeria, because it's not just enough that Theresa May is coming to Africa. So many world leaders do come to Africa and ignore Nigeria. It's a good thing that she's coming here. But then, like we just raised, what is being brought to the table? What will be in this for Nigerians after this visit? What do we look forward to?
Well, you know that the ambassador just expressed an aspiration to move from being the second biggest investor on the continent to being the #1 in the coming years. So what that it means is that we hope that they will open the door for further investments in the country. They're already talking about jobs creation, not only in their own country, but also in Nigeria. This is a key matter for us. But it is also significant that this is not just about Nigeria gaining from, because they too, they have their own gains they hopefully should be making. For instance, there are matters of chemical weaponry, which has been destabilizing for the UK, and they want to get an international handle on all of these things, and particularly these matters of migration. Now, how do you combat all of matters such as that one? Because we all, our people are trooping to Europe, daring the desert and all of the consequences that attend to that, because they aspire to good life. And so therefore, if there is conscience among the nations of the world and their leaders, you know, the thing then is, how do you now create the same, if you can, kind of environment for us here, so that Nigerians, all of us on the continent, will feel contented, decide to remain home, and not there the desert and cross onto their own part of the world. So the thing that will help us to do this is, of course, further investments, bringing capital so that we create industry and generate jobs for our people so that they have things to do and they have good life to aspire to.
You understand that Theresa May is visiting, perhaps because of economic reasons, basically, because when Britain finally exits from the EU, Britain is trying to re-establish relationships, in fact, strengthen relationships, economic relationships, so to speak, because that's why my colleague asked about what we are bringing to the table. You mentioned about further investments. Are you now saying that Britain, we could get to a situation where Britain will begin to invest in Nigeria once more? And the second leg of my question is this. The president, on assuming office in 2015, did extend the hand of fellowship to other parts of the world to assist Nigeria in the recovery of public funds stashed in their countries. How far has that gone with respect to the UK?
Well, I think so much has changed on matters of recovery of stolen assets. Certainly under the new dispensation in the country, so much has been achieved. We had gotten back, more than 80 million pounds recently is in the treasury, from the UK. And we're aware that the UK government has, working with all of our agencies, the EFCC and so on, they've succeeded identifying and blocking access to assets that are there in the UK. So in the context of all that is happening within the Commonwealth, which has an agreement to assist, each nation assisting one another to stem corruption and aid the recovery and repatriation of, I think that we are seeing movements now. In the past, much of it has been a lot of talk. The UK has a plan, yes, to expand investment on the continent, and they are talking about bringing a lot of money. I have seen the numbers. I can't say these are the numbers, but we are expecting that because Europeans would kind of move away from them, they're trying to shift also to our continent, and that should be good news to us. And I
asked that question because, of course, she is actually on an economic mission.
That's our mission.
Talking about the economic mission, Dr. Imam, one of the specifics that we even heard from our introductory report is about human trafficking. She's going to meet with victims of human trafficking, looking for a way to stop people from moving to Africa en masse to Europe, specifically the UK. Is the EU now, Europe, trying to tell Africa to put its house in order so that people will stop populating their countries illegally and then creating problems for them? Because we know quite to a large extent that illegal immigrants do constitute some problems for these people.
Yeah, of course, that's a reality. We can't shy away from that. But then again, of course, migration is a lifelong phenomenon. It has always been there. People have always moved from one place
but when it's
to another.
Illegal, it's a problem.
Yeah, of course, it is a problem. These problems, if we begin to go back to its historical evolution, there's a whole lot of blame to go around.
Yes.
All right. So yes, let's keep it to where we are at present. But then the most important of this, what to take away from all of this is this. You see, the crisis of migration is not just about country of origin. The problem of migration is about country of origin, country of transit, and country of destination. And all these three countries need to come together to be able to tame the tide of migration, or illegal migration, as they call it. Building fences will not stop people from migrating. It has never done in history. It will never do that in the future. What needs to be done is to build longer tables to be able to accommodate other people, particularly those whom you've stolen from historically. Okay, let's not go into history. You mentioned that. It's quite essential that this conversation is done with an open mind so that these issues can be addressed. As far as migration is concerned, people will leave. So, but again, of course, it is imperative that here, like you rightly stated, we need to put our house in order. This is an African problem, and we need to deal with it headlong. We need to be able to put in place infrastructure for our people not to look away. We have a whole lot of brains. You see, the DNA of an average Nigerian is filled with entrepreneurship. But what is lacking is that the enabling environment might have not been created. We're not blaming any government in particular. It's as a result of issues that have been long-standing. But then we see a lot of these things trying to be curbed, but we cannot curb them overnight. So there is the need for collaboration amongst countries that are faced with these crises to be able to tame the tide of these problems. Again, speaking of the economic aspect of Theresa May's visit, it is important that we note that there is nothing morally wrong about that. No. Countries within the international system, particularly today, are beginning to seek newer alliances. We see that happening all around. The Chinese are doing the same, Far East, the Middle East, and all of that. So there is the need for countries to find allies, strong allies within the international system. That is exactly what she's trying to do. Not in the interest of Theresa May, but in the interest of Great Britain and of Nigeria. Any country that intends, that aspires to have a partnership with Africa must put Nigeria into consideration. For obvious reasons. 1 out of every 4 African is a Nigerian. This is the most popular black country in the world. We have about the most mineral resources that the world yearns for deposited in this country. So therefore, there is the need to strengthen ties and relations with Nigeria, and that's exactly what she's trying to do.
All right, and we actually hope to see the benefits, after this visit. And let me return to the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity. The fight against insurgency or terrorism has been an onerous task which this government has been able to tackle to the extent that Boko Haram has extensively been decimated. Now, is the president going to request for further assistance on the part of Britain, because we don't really have a clear information on the contribution of Britain towards the fight against insurgency in Nigeria? Are we going to bring that to the table? Is there any need for further assistance in this direction?
Well, certainly it's one of the key issues for discussion. Perhaps the main issue, because security, without security, there is nothing that you can actually do. You know that the UK and France, working with Nigeria, have a new initiative now, and this is aimed at policing the border between Nigeria, Nigeria, Cameroon, and Chad. We are surrounded by the French, so therefore the 3 countries are synergizing to see how there can be support, to restrict or curtail the movement of armed, attackers, and the terrorists and all of that. But even before now, no, Nigerian government has received perhaps the most that any country could get from the UK dealing with the terrorism. You know that when President Buhari came in the first instance, we had access to weaponry in a number of these countries, including EU and the United States, blocked. All of this, windows are being opened. We can now buy whatever we want. But beyond that, there's a lot of training that is coming from the UK in particular, for our armed forces. And the sharing of intelligence, which is also key, especially given their advancement, on matters of satellite technology and, all of the things that help to, keep an eye on the territory. So really there's this, following the growing perception that it's not just a single country problem, dealing with terrorism. And this Sahel-wide thing for us, which connects to the global terrorism map. We're getting a lot of support, and I think we're thankful for that.
Yes. Your final thoughts on this as we round off?
Well, my final thoughts would be that at the end of these conversations, where governments meet, it's not just about Tea Party. It's about the end product of the conversations. It's about needs, it's about interest, and it's about what position you have in that conversation. I hope that this relation translates into further development for our people, to be able to put smiles on the faces of average Nigerians, and then, of course, to be able to tell the Brits that we have something to offer them, and they have something to gain from us. This is what I hope that we gain from that.
Before you conclude,
yes,
is
please.
there any pact existing between Nigeria and Britain? If there is, could you just expatiate?
Well, we have always had a pact in defense in different aspects. We've had bilateral relations, agreements between both countries and all. And there is the need to also further strengthen on some of these things in economy and in all ramifications of diplomacy. We have had different relations, but then the pact which would have probably transformed all of this situation would have been what Tafawa Balewa tried to do when we gained independence. But, well, thankfully or not thankfully, we didn't go into that. So let's not.
It's a flying visit, and we do hope Nigeria will make the best use of the visit. And thank you very much. I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for coming. Malan Garba Shehu, for always obliging us when we call you, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity. Thank you for joining us. And also you, Dr. Mukhtar Imam of the Department of International Relations and Diplomacy of the University, yes. Abuja. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
We'll kick off our next discussion very soon. We'll take a break. Stay with us.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Winning in hot and dry conditions is hard. Causes the body to sweat, which attracts germs that are easily passed from one person to another.
What keeps you so cool, man?
Dettol Cool combines Dettol's protection and an invincible icy feel. For super cool confidence, use Dettol Cool.
Dettol soap is now also available for 100 Naira only.
Hold it! Me! I don't cover my hand from oil bunkering.
General, what you going to yarn? What did the yarn say? I don't understand though.
Because they spoil our water and our environment. And they cause our people serious harm. Militants said, you know good. Me! I not do again, Sam. Because why? Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
And to kickstart the second leg of our discussion, let's take excerpts from the first part of the program.
Why do we appear to have that challenge with effective dredging of the eastern seaports?
Kingsley, the issue of dredging is cardinal. In the eastern ports is about 7 to 8 meter deep, while you need about 12, 13 average for big seafaring vehicles and vessels to enter. However, in the last 30 years, contracts for dredging have been given repeatedly. 30 years, from the days of Gowon and back, they've been giving contracts for dredging. The issue is, where is the performance of those contracts?
The high patronage of Lagos Port is a question of when there is no variable, then the alternative becomes the preferable. However, there is a lot of things that governments, both the government and the private sector need to do. And we should equally take a cue from the neighboring ports. If you go to Cotonou Port, it's fully automated in terms of port operation and clearing procedure. So a single window system is working in Cotonou. Before the establishment of single window in Cotonou, cargo dwell time was more than 30 days. Now it has crashed down to less than 10 days. The port of Lome, single window is equally working. Before the establishment of single window in port of Lome, cargo dwell time was more than 30 days. Now it is 3 days. So definitely, if we want to move forward, there is need to bring the element of automation in our port system.
There's need for us to look at our local charges, number one. Look at it. How much are we charging these vessels that are coming into our waterways? And that is why they are transferring this cost to the final consumer. And who is the final consumer? The importer that is bringing in this vessel. The Shippers Council has tried recently, about a year ago, to give what is called sensitization and look at how do we have freight collapse. But this has not been actually achieved.
So what we've done so far is to see how we can have an eagle eye on our maritime domain by having an apt satellite surveillance, which can reach out to our economic zone, beyond our economic zone. And the facility we have now goes beyond our economic zone, up to 312 nautical miles of our economic exclusive zone. So this gives us the impetus to see what is actually obtainable there, because if you cannot see, you can't engage. So we have a 24-hour surveillance now, and we've been able to acquire about 5 fast intervention boats now, which is grossly inadequate.
And all right, to further discuss this issue, we have in our studio here Hassan Bello is Executive Secretary, Nigeria Shippers Council. So it's a pleasure to have you on this program this morning.
We'd also like to introduce Rear Admiral Makonju Kadiri. He's the Chief of Training and Operations at Naval Headquarters, Abuja. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, ma'am.
And also with us in our Abuja studio is Mani Ochugboju. He's our regular, a legal practitioner and transport consultant. Good to see you again, Mani.
Thank you very much.
And, well, let's inform you that we had earlier invited the DG of Nimasa, Dakuku Peters, and Peter's side. And it's unfortunate that he couldn't make it this morning to this conversation, because it's, Nimasa is a special key holder when it comes to the issue on the table this morning on Good Morning Nigeria for discussion. Gentlemen, you're welcome to the second leg of our conversation this morning.
So let's kick off with the DG Shippers Council. So many issues were thrown up, even from our introduction, and the earlier guests we had on the program threw up a lot of issues. From your own point, why is it that the eastern seaports are underutilized?
Yeah, I think without repeating what was said the last time, there are certain dynamics which we have to, adopt in analyzing why. Chief of which is the limitations. Navigational limitations. You talk about the draft, you talk about the depth. We also have the issue of security and what I call community interferences in discharge of ships, at the eastern ports. We also have the problem of hinterland connection. If you have a port in the east, then it behoves you to have means of evacuating this cargo from the port. Now, the idea of having, large ships coming to Nigeria, that is what is of international standard. We need to have modern ports. Now, the ports in the east have their limitations. And so, in the shipping dynamics, you need to have what I may call feeder ports. You bring is the spoke and the hub, system in transport topology, meaning there must be, a central port which will accommodate large ships. Let's take, for example, the Lekki deep sea port, which the federal government is constructing, with the private sector, costing about $1.5 billion. It has the capacity of 6 million TEUs per annum. That is because it accommodates large ships from 5,000 to 15,000 TEUs, Panamax, post-Panamax. You don't expect because of the shallowness of these ports. And sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. The draft is not for you to begin to, make it deeper because it may affect structurally the port. That's what we have in the Eastern Port. So we have the issue of navigational hindrance. In fact, it is long, channel, about 80 miles. So you have to have, dredging, maintenance, dredging all the time, which makes it very expensive. And then the issue of security and the issue of hinterland connection. This may be the problems. But the Federal Ministry of Transportation is heading a committee made up of the shipping companies, the terminal operators, Nigerian Shippers Council, NTA, NIMASA, all tackling this issue of patronage.
I was going to say that, are we just going to leave them that way and then keep piling the pressure on the Lagos port?
Yeah, the Lagos port, must be the hub. And then you make them feeder ports.
It must be the hub.
Yes, transshipment, to Calabar, to Warri, to Port Harcourt. Not necessarily the big ships, because the big ships cannot navigate there. But it makes sense for you to have equipment, at these ports. It makes sense for us to patronize this port. We cannot keep them, idle. It is a lot of sense. It will make a lot of confer economic advantage to Nigeria if we utilize the Eastern ports. Engagement of youth, the economy, where these ports are situated, and so many advantages. So the federal government has set aside on utilizing or patronizing the Eastern ports, and they are bringing all, its authority to make sure that this is possible.
All right, thank you. You raised a number of issues here. You talked about shipping dynamics, insecurity, hindrances, navigational hindrances, and of course, dredging. Now, let's turn to Rear Admiral Makono Kadiri. Do you share the views of Hassan Bello with respect to the underutilization of eastern seaports in Nigeria?
Thank you very much, sir. It is largely obvious that the eastern ports in Nigeria are grossly underutilized. And it has actually raised the fundamental issues. But coming from the security perspective, I would like to just divide the issues into two broad categories: operational challenges, security challenges. Now let's start with the operational challenges, like he has mentioned. For the captain of a vessel who is bringing his ship into a port, his first concern is the safety of navigation. And that has largely to do with the approaches to the port. Over time, because of the effects of siltation, the depths available for ships to navigate in some of these channels has been reduced. But there are prospects, and one of it is that I think recently, contracts have been awarded for the dredging of Calabar, Port Harcourt, and maybe Warri channels. If this comes on stream, then the confidence of other seafarers will be restored so that they can patronize the eastern ports. So I agree that that one will be settled with time. Now let's come to the other one, the security challenges. One of the big responsibilities for us in the Navy is to shape the security environment, to give confidence to seafarers so that they can feel safe to patronize our ports. As we speak today, so much has been done to address security concerns for people operating in the eastern flank of Nigerian ports. Around 2015, there was a spate of attacks on shipping on the eastern flank. And in response, the Nigerian Navy activated a dedicated operation to combat armed robbery at sea and piracy. And if you look at the statistics, from 2016 down, there has been a downward trend in attack on shipping. And we even went the extra mile. If you look at Calabar Port, for instance, Calabar Port is largely used by passenger vessels from our contiguous states that are contiguous to Nigeria, Cameroon and Gabon. What we do in the Navy is, when these ships are coming, we establish contact with them. And right from outside Nigeria's waters, we provide dedicated security, escort them into the channel, escort them even up to the port. And if you look, you can confirm from Calabar Port, in the past 3 years, there has not been an attack on any passenger vessel calling at that Calabar Port because of this dedicated operation. We are doing a lot of things. In the Navy, for us, it is fundamental that our ports, our maritime environment is kept safe because of its strategic importance. 90% of our shipping in and out is by sea. And with respect to the safety of navigation, we also have a responsibility to coordinate hydrography in Nigeria. And we are doing a lot of things. Let me just give you about 2-3 of what we are doing. Recently, we have activated initiatives to chart our waters, our national waters, not the international waters, now our national waters, so that we can make them more, we can make them more navigable. Nigerian Navy is building hydrographic survey capabilities. We're acquiring survey vessels. We are now into cartography to make charts, because for so many years we rely on the Royal Navy.
Can you break these things down for us a bit? Some of us that are not.
Okay, Mara. You see, it's just like you talk about maps.
Okay.
If you want to, even now, in your vehicle, you have the GPS.
GPS, yeah.
Which you can access some maps so that you can find your way around town. Similarly, if you look at the sea, it's formless.
Yes.
You don't have features there. You just have the sea and the sky. So the question is, how do you move? Where do you move? Now you rely on equipment.
Okay.
So you need charts. These charts are just like maps.
Okay.
And there are a number of information that will be on these charts. The most important to you is the depth. How much distance do you have under your ship so that your ship will not go and sit on the floor? There are also a lot of hazards that are not visible to you, but they're underwater. There are some rocks. They're not showing up, but they're there, and you don't want to go and collide with them. So now we're building capacity so that we can make our charts so that our national waters, there are more than 3,000 creeks in riverine part of Nigeria. So we're trying to chart all this. We're trying to build capacity for hydrographic survey so that we can enhance the safety of navigation.
We'll be back with you, Rear Admiral. Let's go to Manny now. Manny, from our various discussions, even with the ones you have joined us in many of them, we agree, we all understand that the eastern ports are underutilized. But then, what's the cost of this? I'm not even talking only now about the Naira and Kobo costs now. The cost of underutilizing on our society, on unemployment, on so many other things. What's the cost of this?
The cost is difficult to quantify, and experts vary on what the cost is. But if you look at data provided before the concession of the ports, you will hear costs ranging from 70 million to 100 million per annum, which can be saved when the ports are concessioned and are effectively working. We are also told of figures up to $2 billion in a span of 10 years that can be saved if the ports are working properly and if there is efficiency in the handling of cargo. We were also told before the concessioning that there will be a reduction in importation costs, that there will be reduction in the handling of cargo, that there will be reduction in post operation. And we were also told that there will be increased employment for those within the riverine community, that there will be improvement in the access roads and in the rails as well. I'm glad Mr. Bello mentioned rail, that there will be increase in the connectivity with the hinterland, that these access roads will be improved. Not to talk of the cargo handling equipments, the cargo handling, the warehousing equipments as well. All of these were part of the promises of the concessioning that started around 2003 to 2006 during the Obasanjo regime. The issue now is, have these promises been delivered? And to a large extent, no. I say no to the extent that the eastern ports are neglected or underperforming. Neglected to the extent that most of the cargo that we handle, the containers, both liquid and dry, still go through Lagos. I respect Bello's view that Lagos should be the hub, but notwithstanding, the eastern ports, in my opinion, with due respect to Bello, still have the potentials for growth, for shipping, maritime services, for port handling equipments. The eastern ports have more potentials now than Lagos. Lagos, with due respect to Lagos, I like Lagos, I lived in Lagos. Lagos is oversubscribed already as it is. 80% of our cargo can be going through Lagos continually. 80% of our shipping activities should not be taking place in and around Lagos alone. 80% of our tank farms should not be concentrated in and around Lagos alone. If you move the facilities and the opportunities and the services to the eastern ports, it will balance the maritime development and the maritime industry. It will balance it out. And still on the potentials for growth. The maritime industry in Nigeria have not even exhausted its potentials for Nigeria, let alone for West Africa and Central Africa yet. We are still looking at the projection of about 10% so far. So we are looking at still another 80 to 85 to 90% projection of growth. Where would that come from? From Lagos? Yes, fine. Lagos is getting Lekki and Badagry. But then there's opportunity for growth in the east. Akwa Ibom Deep Sea, and there are some conversation around Calabar Deep Sea. And I know that some private individuals and others are also promoting another deep sea in Ibiano in Akwa Ibom as well. I believe that if Lagos have 4 ports, Akwa Ibom, Calabar, Port Harcourt, Warri, and others can each have 2 more. There's still room for growth. What we have now is still not even enough for what Nigeria needs, let alone for West Africa and for Southern Africa. That's why I believe that there's still a lot that needs to be done.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. I think the key issue here is underutilization of the eastern seaports. And I want us to get to a point where we begin to address the reason, the major reasons why they're underutilized. Because we can't just be raising the issue of insecurity, navigational challenges, and what have you. But these are nature existing, waiting to be properly utilized. Right, Billy, let me come back to you. What is it? What is it that should be done? Because from what Manny has raised here, it does show that something is wrong somewhere.
You know, the fundamental thing about utilization of ports or patronizing ports is a decision rests on the shipper, the consignee, the owner of the cargo. He decides which port his cargo will be taken to. This is a fundamental issue. If he wants Lagos, it has to be Lagos.
He must have his reasons.
Yes, he must have reasons for doing that. And one of the reasons is economic reasons.
Is that a regulatory approach to
so
this?
That is one of the things that we have to face and equip the ports. We have to equip these ports so that the shipper can make a decision. I agree with you, Manu, when you said Lagos is overused, oversubscribed, if you like, and we should distribute, cargo, to other ports. Not only seaports, but we have river ports. We have inland ports. As a matter of fact, cargo should not be examined, at the ports. It should be taken to, fan out to inland ports or off-dock terminals. This will bring the congestions out and help the economy of the eastern port. But the ports, must receive some attention from the government to make them work. Now, the ports have been concessioned. I know we have problems, certain distortions with the concessioning of the ports. But concessioning of the port is also one of the most important things that has happened, in the transport sector, whereby we bring the private sector to lead. Government cannot, be the operator of cargo as it was before. We expect competition. There should be inter and intra-port competition. Okay, the port of Warri, should compete with the port of Port Harcourt or Calabar, incentivizing the shippers to come out, patronize my port. So I'm going to give you these incentives. If you come to Calabar port, this is the rate. If you come to Warri, so there should be competition, just like we have in communication. We have different telephone companies.
So why is that? Why is the competition not there?
That is it. We said there are some distortions, and that's what the committee that has been set up, by the federal government is looking. Because for competition start, I believe the federal government should, come in somehow unmake these ports or remove certain inhibitions. It is the responsibility of the government to make the ports even attractive for investors to come in.
I will go back to Rear Admiral Kadiri now, and I will talk about security again. And this I want to ask from the point of view of a layman. We seem to hear every time that crude theft, illegal activities happen in some of these eastern ports. They don't use small vessels to steal crude oil, but they still find a way of getting these things, navigating them around. And then the ones that are of economic value to the country, we hear stories of how they can't come to the ports. I mean, like I said, I'm talking from a layman's point of view. So can you just shed light on things like that?
Thank you very much, Mariam. Just like you have said, talking from a layman's perspective,
yes.
There are many stories that people peddle.
Okay.
But when we come to facts, you find out that some of the stories are not really what, as they are painted.
Okay.
I told you earlier that some vessels that patronize the Calabar port go in and out unhindered because of effective presence by the Nigerian Navy.
Okay.
I think, to me, having the DG has already discussed some of the technical points, but if you look at it generally, we now need to begin to build confidence in shippers. Some perceptions stay for a long time. Do you know, if you go abroad now, some people believe that if you just come into Nigeria today, Boko Haram will just kill you. But it's not true. We still move around freely. We need to build confidence because it is in our collective interest to decongest the use of the Lagos ports. A lot of people that do business in the Apapa area cannot access there because, you see, articulated vehicles lined up there over kilometers. Even the Shippers Council, your office is in Apapa. I don't know how easy it is for you to access your office, sir. Now, we are doing a lot in security. We still import fuel into Nigeria on a daily basis using large vessels. They're not attacked because the Navy is there for them. So there cannot be any difference between cargo vessels. Yes. On airport, FOT is widely used. It's very busy. If you go to Port Harcourt, the Federal Ocean Terminal is very busy. And you record LNG is operating in Bonny, and they do large shipments. It's going on. I think somehow people have become used to Lagos. And we can always continue to talk about these security issues. No, to me, yes. The one that is critical is the safety of navigation, dredging of the channel, so that large tonnage vessels can visit those ports. And maybe also to improve the capacity of the cargo handling capacity in some of those ports. But if that is not done, light vessels can still go there. There are some times too that we lighten up a vessel. Even when we import fuel, very large carriers will stay offshore and then you lighten to come inshore. We can do the same thing to cargo vessels. That's what I'm saying. Though it may increase the cost, but it can be done. When you now build a cost, if you marry them, sir, I'm not an economist, but I can say, when you take almost 14 days to clear your cargo in Lagos, and it takes you so many hours to line up and approach the ports. And when you conclude this, when you combine this, and then you have to transport a cargo from Lagos by road to maybe Onitsha, when you had a cost, to me, going through Calabar or Warri is better.
That's why we were wondering. That's why people are clamoring for things to be put right in this instant port. You were yes, trying to speak to that.
I agree, with the Admiral, that NIMASA and Nigerian Navy are doing a lot about security of cargo. One of the reasons why people wouldn't like to, consign their cargo to eastern ports is the issue of security. The Navy, the incidence of security has reduced drastically. As a matter of fact, Nigerian Shippers Council is fighting, the carriers who have put a war risk clause, on our cargo. If we are shipping to Nigeria, there is a war risk clause, as if we are in a war. But this is not justified. This battle has been fought. Incidences of armed robbery, or what you may call piracy, has reduced drastically. So this is one of the things. And the federal government has signed a contract now with the Israelis, about total surveillance. This will further curtail, the incidents of security. So if that one is tackled, the issue is to equip these ports. On a port is patronized because it is efficient. Okay? Other ports may not be. In fact, so when we visited other ports, they cannot measure so they don't have equipment even to clear the goods. The clearance process is primitive. And so it's a matter of competition. You know, if war report is good, people patronize it. So we need to make them, you know, compete against one another so that there will be choice for the shipper.
Still on security, I will turn to you, Admiral. The issue of security has been raised a number of times whenever we're discussing the issue of seaports in this country, and have given assurances that the Navy is doing something credible to that effect. And Bello just informed us that the federal government just signed an agreement with the Israelis to provide the surveillance and all of that. Now, do you have the capacity? Do you have you know, the manpower to and equipment to man several kilometers you know, of all those sea and river around Nigeria? Is there any difficulty, you know, in terms of providing the needed security?
Thank you very much, sir. Let me start from the issue of surveillance. If I invite you to take a tour of some of our maritime domain awareness capability, you will be shocked at what you will see. We have a 24/7 surveillance of our maritime environment. We have the Regional Maritime Awareness Capability System, which has been installed almost 15 years ago. We also have the Falcon Eye system, which gives us a global picture of the maritime space. The new contract will only just come to complement that.
Yes.
So let me just say that about 3 years ago, the Nigerian Navy sailed a ship from here to Australia, and the ship came back by our own crew. So if we're talking about capability, we have the manpower. The Nigerian Navy moved ships from here to Liberia when that country was engaged in the civil war, and we delivered there. If you go to sea, we're there 24/7. So manpower issue is not there. The Nigerian Navy is 62 years old, and we have come a long way. Only about 3 months ago, when we were marking our 62nd anniversary, we convened an international maritime exercise. We had about 7 countries participating, and we put about 20 ships to sea, just to show you our preparedness to defend our sea area. So there's no doubt that we have the manpower and we have the capability, but we still need more encouragement because maritime security is expensive.
What about equipment? Because it's part of it.
Yeah.
And new modern technology.
In about a few days, we're going to commission about 6 inshore patrol craft and about 12 interceptors. We're retooling our fleet. We're training our personnel to enhance their capability and their ability to deliver. And then we are not forgetting that the sea area has a lot of stakeholders. So we are involved also in a lot of collaboration, both locally and internationally, because maritime crime is transnational. You can't fight it alone. And the last aspect I would like to bring about size. We have arrested a number of people carrying out illegalities at sea. Enforced prosecution now. We have secured, the prosecuting agencies of government have secured some convictions, but there's still a lot to be done so as to deter criminals.
How much of deployment of satellite is used by the Nigerian Navy in terms of navigation?
I don't think there's any, even our smallest boats is fitted with the global positioning system. This technology has been with us over time.
Okay. We'll be going to Manny now. Manny, let's talk about the concession. Some analysts are already saying that there should be a review of the concession of some of these ports. Because if something has been concessioned to you, it's for you to make it right and then generate money and make it usable. If it is not being done, should we now start thinking of reviewing these things and then even the public-private partnership arrangements of these ports?
Thank you very much. Incidentally, I'm one of the critics of the Obasanjo concession that took place during his era. The whole idea was good, as Bello have said. It is imperative that we bring in private sector, technical know-how, financing, and cargo handling efficiency and other stuff, yes. But the way and manner the present operators have been carrying on their business in the last 10 years, the concessioning vary from terminal to terminal. For some, it's 10 years. For others, it's 15 years. For most of them, it's 25 years. So many of them are coming to their terminal stage now. I don't call for abrogation of those concessions. No, it's a contract. Let's respect it, at least so that there will be international confidence in contracts that Nigerian government and others sign. But what I'm respectfully suggesting is that when they come to an end, some of them will be ending in the next 4 years or 5 years or even 10 years as the case may be. We have to critically review the performance. Take a look at the key performance indicators. Have they met them? Look at their business case or full business case when they pitched this idea of concession to us. They came with fantastic ideas of how they will revolutionize the eastern ports, transform the cargo handling efficiency, bring new equipments, bring down cost of importation and what have you. Look at what they promised us and look at what they performed. And what have they delivered? And in my opinion, they've been colossal failure right across the board. Only a few cases of success stories here and there that you can point hand to. For those few ones, I mean, we don't have to mention names. We give them their due respect. But for the majority of all the others, particularly in the eastern ports, incidentally, some of the operators in the eastern ports are also in Lagos too. There are one or two that cut across. You see an operator or a concessionaire in Calabar, he's also in Warri, or he's in Port Harcourt, Old Port Harcourt. So they are interlinked, as it were. So I don't know why they will be efficient in Tinkan Island and will be grossly inefficient in Calabar or in Warri. Those are issues that we really have to look at. I'm sure Bello would take a second look at those issues because they are working on reviving their capacity and performance.
Manny, before we go to Mr. Bello, I will still stay on that. One would think that this is a business arrangement. If something has been concessioned to you, it's because you want to make money from it. So if you're not being efficient at it and you are not making money from it, how then are they operating?
It's actually curious. Those in Calabar, for example, are talking of losing money and underperforming. They talk of equipments that they have imported, $1 million, $2 million equipments that are lying idle. So to a large extent, they are underperforming even in their own business, case. They are underperforming, not to talk of the service they owe us as a country because port is a critical national infrastructure. So if it is underperforming, it affects the rest of us as well. I don't think they are doing well in their business. I know a few of them are doing well. And if they are not doing well, well, that's another reason why when their concession comes to an end, it should be reviewed. I know some will say you should abrogate it, you should review it critically and say to them, thank you very much, pay them off, pay them some compensation, and let them go and let new concessionaires take over and see if they can introduce competition and see if they can work hard in bringing down the cost of importation. And also, too, the regulatory agencies like the Nigerian Ports Authority have to also look at the issue of incentivization. How much incentive are the eastern ports getting? If, for example, when they were running these ports, they introduced incentives, up to 30% in some cases, for cargoes and imports to Port Harcourt, to Warri, and to Calabar. Why can't some concession be given now? Or let me even use the exact word. Why can't some inducements and some incentives be given to them? The issue of regulation that Kyrian mentioned, quite rightly so. Yes, it's an issue. They have the rights to set rates, shipping rates, harbor rates, and other rates. Nigerian Ports Authority can waive their concession, can waive, it's in their discretion to reduce those rates. So if, for example, a ship is being charged $71,000 to berth in Lagos, make it 50, make it 45 for Calabar, for example. And I tell you, they will start moving to Calabar almost overnight. Furthermore, some of the ships, you can use flat belly ships. You call them flat belly, I'm sure. Bello will correct me. Bring flat belly ships. They don't all have to be these ones that must be, that needs 15-meter drafts. You don't need it. You can bring the flat ones. Lastly, you can do transshipments. You can do transshipment. You talked about the hub, you know, and the spoke. Do transshipments. Warri Port is next door to Onitsha. A large percentage of the shipments coming through Lagos, they end up in Onitsha Market. What is wrong with Onitsha Market Association using Warri Port? I know they had some altercation with customs that they don't want to be examined in Warri and then re-examined in Onitsha. But that's a simple matter that can be resolved. That should not frustrate the use of Warri Port when the whole place there is lying fallow and idle.
Yeah. Thank you, Manny. Thank you indeed. I think what one can make of this submission this morning is that there is this inability to effect a kind of a restructuring of the system, because everything is almost there from what we've heard. It just depends on the ability for us to now see, okay, let us harness what we have and put the ideas together for a better future for the industry. But let me come to you, Bello. You told us earlier on that the importers determine where the ports to use, right? And because of the poor nature of our regulatory arrangement, you decide where you go. And the Minister of Transportation some time ago did accuse importers of utilizing ports of neighboring countries as against our own ports, which means, yes, Lagos is congested, but some importers are utilizing seaports of our neighboring countries to the detriment of the eastern ports in Nigeria.
Yes.
What do you make of this?
But they have the right to. You know, that's the fundamental issue. Some of the things when you said goods are diverted to foreign neighboring ports, it's not diversion. It's an economic, deliberate decision by the shipper, because it's an economic decision. A shipper will determine which is more advantageous to him between port A or port B or terminal A or B. Okay? If you have to sign 50 documents in terminal A, and then your cargo will dwell at that terminal for 40 days, and then you have to pay local shipping charges, you would rather go to Terminal B, where you sign only one document, where your cargo will dwell for only 5 days, and you pay less fee. So it's not a sentimental issue. What we need is automation, of our ports. The clearance process and procedures are near primitive, whereby we have 100% examination of container, for example. It doesn't happen anywhere. I know the Nigerian custom is working very hard to ensure that scanners are brought to our ports, and then the other process are automated, and that's what it means. So I think the concession agreement, of course, they are due for review, but the review is not only on the side of the government or regulators. Even the people operating the concessions, that is the terminal operators, they want a review too. It has been working for 10 years or more, and everything that works for 10 or more years need to be reviewed. They also are looking at obligations of the government, and the government sometimes may not have consistency, in policies. Look at the Apapa Road, for example. No matter how efficient a terminal is, if we cannot convey the cargo out of the airport, then there will be problems. So government has obligations to the concession agreement, just like the terminal operators have. So it's good for them to come together, because this review is not going to be one-sided. It will have to bring all the terminals, and I believe that there should be a supervisor, like Nigerian Shippers Council is looking at auditing the performance of all these ports. And it could be recommended that you have not performed or you have not fulfilled your obligations. So it is very important we contextualize port operations with the world dynamics of what's happening in shipping. Shipping is international. There is no Nigerian shipping or Warri shipping or Birnin Kebbi shipping. It has to be in conformity with the international practice.
How do we make that happen?
We can make that. We have started doing that. We are now building the Lekki deep seaport, which is a serious commitment of the government. The government is revolutionizing the rail system. After we have had this rail, Nigeria will never be the same again. And all the ports will be connected with rail, including the seaport, the dry ports, the river ports. There is the inland waterways. It's coming up now. A barge could take 300, the load of 30 trailers. We have to utilize multimodalism. you know, to make sure that we don't depend on this road, because the connection to the port is very, very important. Like Shippers Council has been saying, we have Lekki Deep Seaport, but we need to have, you know, multimodal access in terms of rail, in terms of inland waterways, and sometimes trucking road. We can't have the port in Lekki without rail. It will be the same thing that we have in Apapa. We should always make sure that we look at what's happening in the world. A port is as good as its inland connection, because the goods come, they are taken away from the ports to make room for, you know, many of this cargo to come. So it's everybody's responsibility. But I think we need strong regulation. We need to patronize or to make the eastern ports useful. We need to look at Niger, for example, Republic. They wanted to use the Warri port for importation of chemical, you know, so that they could take it from there. But what are the routes, you know, for you to take goods to Niger? Is the road, and the road is not good. We need the rail, because Calabar could be the distribution center of all this West and Central Africa, Chad, Central African Republic, and many others, Northern Cameroon, and so on. We are strategically placed to play a dominant role, you know, in international trade. And I think the government is very serious about this. Very soon you will see a lot of things. And we have to thank the Navy and the NIMASA for what they have been doing to reduce also incidents of, you know, as insecurity, you know, in our ports.
All right, thank you. Before we return to Admiral, let's go to Mani once again. Mani, loading cost has been identified as one of the reasons for the underutilization of eastern ports. To what extent is that true? But if it is true, what can be done to make the eastern ports more attractive to importers?
I slightly differ on those issues. Much as I respect economic forces being the determinant of most of what happens in the maritime industry, I strongly believe that government intervention is primary. It is also very important. It is important particularly because a developing country, even WTO regulations and other international regulations understand that you need some waivers here and there. You need some protection of your local industry. Yes, if you allow our maritime industry to be exposed to the vagaries and the oppression of international maritime industry, they will just keep pushing us from right to left, you know, like a canoe on a high sea. So the government's intervention is important. Some of those rates, the cost of loading, the cost of batting, the cost of bringing in a vessel into a harbor, all of that can be regulated and it can be incentivized. I keep saying this. It can be controlled. You can control them. You can reduce the cost of loading in Calabar. You can reduce the cost of loading in Warri. You can reduce the cost of loading in Port Harcourt. I believe all of that can be controlled by the Nigerian Ports Authority. It is within their functions and statutory powers so to do.
Okay, we viewers have been reacting, so we have some tweets from them now. And the first one I have here is from Ogbeni Omobolaho with the handle Ogbeni GO. He says the opening of Southeast Seaport will drastically reduce the pressure on Lagos. It will open more economic activities in the geopolitical zone and generate thousands of job opportunities. Governments must look into that direction as a matter of utmost importance.
All right, from Sani Michael Omakuji, he says, even though Lagos Seaport is seen as feeder port, it must be pointed out that not until we pay attention to eastern ports to decentralize economic activities at Lagos Seaport, we shall continue to experience gridlock at Lagos Seaport. Our seaports must be unbundled.
And DW Nigeria says he actually has an accusation. He says, we all know this is politics being played. How can any other port be neglected to the benefits of Lagos Port? Any justifications? There may have been collusions between the federal government and Lagos to continually use Lagos as opposed to other ports. Remember, Lagos makes significant revenues from these ports and other businesses in the state.
All right, from Obweni Mobolanho once again, the onerous burden the Lagos seaport puts on the helpless citizens is quite untold. The gridlock along Apapa has come to the front burner every now and then. Then the menace is causing the concomitant inconveniences and also enough reasons for government to consider the Onitsha port.
And Dele Jack Solomon says, indeed, the decongestion of the Lagos port is a good step in the right direction. This initiative will go a long way in reducing extreme traffic gridlocks and environmental decrepitude in Lagos, which will make life difficult and unbearable for Nigerians traversing the Lagos highways. Those are the tweets we have for now. And I'm going to go back to Mr. Bello with this accusation from one of the contributors here. And there's a conspiracy theory he has thrown up here. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. There is no conspiracy theory. It is good for the government to utilization of the Eastern Port to decongest, Lagos is a beautiful thing, and government should take, responsibility of addressing the issues why we are not utilizing. Don't forget, there are also other ports. We have Kaduna Inland Dry Port. Okay, it's a port of destination and the port of origin.
And someone just mentioned on Onitsha port.
Yes, and Onitsha River Port. So these are all, a port, is where goods are either loaded or discharged. It need not to be a seaport. Like airport, it's a port, and the same thing with dry port. So you see now if you go to Kaduna, the patronage is there for export. So we need to have, this port. I don't agree with that conspiracy theory.
Kadri, let's go back to security issues now. You have told us a lot of things that the Nigerian Navy is doing to secure the ports, but then there must still be some challenges and some I's to dot and T's to cross.
Yeah. Thank you very much, madam. For us in the Nigerian Navy, we have a strategy to ensure the defense of Nigeria's maritime interests. And I will articulate 3 of them and then tell you some of the challenges that are there. First, we look at it that Nigeria's maritime space, we divided them right from the shore out to the deep sea. We have found out that the area where there is critical security challenge is in the internal waters. We have thousands of creeks in Nigeria, most of them not navigable. Only small craft we use there. Now, what we are doing, the first thing is we want to be able to see what is going on in this area. So the Nigerian Navy, we have what we call a trinity of action. We want to ensure that we have what we call maritime domain awareness, surveillance. The next thing, we want to be able to respond to what we see. So in that area of response, that's where you need ships, you need aircraft. In the Navy, we have ships and aircraft, but these ships also are very expensive. And that's why what we have been trying to do is to appreciate what government is providing for us within the limits of available resources, and also looking also at alternative means of funding. And that's why recently, if you observe, arising from decisions taken in Lomé in 2016 during the African Union Charter on Maritime Security, Trade and Development, countries were advised to create what they call a Maritime Security Trust Fund, from where you can get money to fund maritime security concerns. I'm happy to inform you that a bill to this respect already, I think, has even got the concurrence of the Senate and only awaiting endorsement by Mr. President, that will provide like 1% of what is derived from shipping to fund maritime security concerns. That could help a lot to provide response capability for the Navy to improve on what we have now. The last aspect, which is what I mentioned earlier, is enforcement. When you arrest an offender, he's brought to justice. If he's diligently prosecuted and convicted, it can be a deterrence to others. We have arrested several ships for various infractions in our maritime environment, but the prosecution has been slow. We don't function there. Our own is just provide the evidence for prosecutions. Yes. So if this aspect, and that's why the other time we're advocating for the establishment of a maritime crime court for speedy dispensation of justice, so that would-be offenders can be deterred. That you can't do. In 2016, There was this MT Maximus. You remember the MT Maximus incident, the ship that was hijacked off the coast of Cote d'Ivoire? Nigerian Navy went to arrest that ship off the coast of Sao Tome and Principe and brought the ship back. It's almost 2 years plus now. The case is still in court.
All right, thank you for that information. Mani, during the Yar'Adua administration, dredging, was commenced in this country for major rivers, in the country, and communities living along those lines celebrated the dredging policy, but that halted after a short while. And in the course of answering one of our questions, I had Bello mentioning that dredging should be a continuous exercise to clear the way for ships to berth. Now, in your consideration, should dredging be continued, and is it also part of the challenge in the maritime industry?
Yes, Kieran. Dredging have two aspects: capital dredging and maintenance dredging. Capital dredging is the one that you open up the channels, you deepen the drafts to the required depth. Maintenance dredging is a continuous one, the regular one that you do because of citation, sediments gathering over years, maybe months, depending on the movement of the sand underneath the belly of the river or the ocean. The problem with with dredging in Nigeria is historical. Unfortunately, the present regime have inherited a very bad mess. It's not something that we can just begin to analyze on national television, but it is one of the worst cases of inefficiencies and abuses, let me put it very mildly. And it goes actually beyond Yar'Adua. I think from the days, even from the days of Abacha's regime, if you look at Eastern ports alone, we're talking of staggering sums of over $36 billion, not naira, at given times that have been given for dredging. And there has been, in many cases, no proper dredging. So if today there is neglect, inefficiencies, inadequacies in Eastern ports, one of the first places to look at, if we have the political will, is the issue of dredging. The contracts that have been awarded in the past, the abuses and the breach of those contracts, those are issues that we have to look at. And these are capital dredging, by the way, not maintenance dredging. Maintenance dredging are just a simple one that is just like maintaining your vehicle on a regular basis. We're talking of capital dredging where you have to excavate the earth to agreed standards for shipping. Like for now, in Calabar, you have about 6-meter draft. I think Warri is about 7, Port Harcourt is about 8. This is not good enough. You're looking at a draft of an average of 12, 13 for big vessels to come in. And these are critical infrastructural deficiencies that is affecting all of us. Because every one of us use one import or the other, whether it's your toothpaste or whatever it is that you have used today. Imports come through the ports. Our exports go through the ports. Yes. 85% of our imports and exports go through the ports. So that is something that is fundamental.
Manny, that's true. And as we round off, very briefly, Mr. Bello, shipping is very important to the economy. That's where imports and exports go through. And we're talking about putting attention now on the non-oil sector. Trading is very important. So how do we now make shipping desirable and more economical to the nation?
We have to look at the infrastructure. Even the ports will have to adapt. For example, we have extractive industry, minerals, which we are going to export in a little while. Now, we have to have ports, that will accommodate, the weight of these chemicals, the density. So sometimes ports, they have a cargo capture. They specialize in 1 or 2 products. We cannot be jacks of all trades. Why don't you design a port to be a port for solid minerals, another port, to be for chemicals. And that is one of the things that should be done to some of these in the southeast. Yes, we have to respond. Yes, with our competitiveness.
Thank you, my friend. That has been a good analysis of what the situation is with respect to the eastern ports in Nigeria. At this point, we'll have to conclude this conversation and, of course, bring you the other segment of our program for today. So thank you indeed, Hassan Bello, Executive Secretary, Nigeria Shippers Council. It's been a pleasure talking to you this morning.
Thank you.
And Rear Admiral Makono Kadiri, Chief of Training and Operations, Naval Headquarters here in Abuja. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and the experience on this program this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And of course, one of our regulars on this show here, Mani Ochuboju, legal practitioner and transport consultant. Thank you for coming this morning on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
And we now continue the program with sports.
The country's football governing body, NFF, have ordered the 24 players invited for the upcoming 2019 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier against Seychelles to report to camp